Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
And welcome to it, Depeche Mode, the podcast. I'm your host, Jon Justice. Glad you are with another episode. If you want to email me, always, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. And we have a lot of listener feedback to get into this week. I wish that I had more news to share, or any news to share, to be honest with you, but as things have been since the end of the Memento Mori tour, everything is very quiet from the camp of Depeche Mode as we await those items that we've talked about every week, the 4 unreleased songs, potential box set for Memento Mori, and the live release of the Memento Mori tour. Rest assured, though, when we do get information officially or rumored, I will provide you that information here on the show. There is one particular item of note this week that does need to be talked about. I was working on a guest, almost had it lined up, but unfortunately they were not feeling very well, but we will have them on the show very soon. A friend of the show, Rob Rome, from the Global Depeche fan group, hoping to get him on soon, and a number of different hosts. He was bummed because today, being the day that this is recorded, Dave Gahan, the soul of Depeche Mode, is celebrating his 62nd birthday. Of course, one of the 2 survivors, as I look at this article from MSN, of the original lineup of the band from Basildon after a short-lived stint of Vince Clarke, later to be reunited with Yazoo and Erasure, the departure of Alan Wilder in 1995, and the sudden death of Andrew Fletcher, an essential link in the development of Depeche Mode sound. Guitarist Martin Gore and singer Dave Gahan are the 2 survivors of the band, founded in Basildon, Essex, England in 1980. Initially, many expected a very short life for this quartet, which took its name from a French fashion magazine and used exclusively first-generation synthesizers, such as the Kawai 100FS, the Roland Jupiter 4, the Yamaha CS5, and the famous ARP 2600. And yet, what freshness comes from the first single, New Life, on the Mute label. Born in Epping on the 9th of May, 1962, Dave Gahan was not yet 20 when the band embarked on their first European tour in September of 1981. 4 cities: Hamburg, the Paradiso in Amsterdam, the Bains Duchess in Paris, and the Disco Rojo in Brussels. Apparently, Dave was chaperoned by his mom on his first visit to the Low Countries. Dave Gahan celebrates his 62nd birthday today. So do him a favor, the article says. Listen to one of his solo albums, interesting, such as Imposter, an album of covers including PJ Harvey, Mark Lanigan, and Neil Young, recorded with Soul Savers, and above all, his heart-rending version of Metal Heart by Marie Chan Marshall, better known by her stage name of Cat Power. You know, I don't know if I would go to one of his solo works for Soul Savers. I think I would be way more inclined to listen to something by Depeche Mode, maybe something specifically that Dave Gahan wrote, as opposed to going to some of the solo material. I don't know. That's an interesting little thought. I hadn't really thought about it until I read that particular item. But happy birthday, Dave, to one of the greatest frontmen that have ever lived. His ever-evolving style throughout the years. If somebody hasn't done it already, and I'm sure somebody has, but I'll go and track it down. I'm sure somebody has gone and put a compilation up of Dave Gahan's dancing styles throughout the years. The best one as of late was the most recent Dave Gahan specific video that I think I've seen, of the one where they were giving names to all of Dave's various moves. But I'll ask this question to you listening, and write me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. Like, which era of Dave performing do you like the most? I'm pausing for dramatic effect, but I'm also pausing because I was wondering myself which era of Dave's on-stage presence I enjoyed most. My gut reaction says the Violator era and the World Violation Tour. I'm toying in my mind with music for the masses, because I really do enjoy the performances in 101. It's tough with World Violation because we don't have a lot of material to work from apart from sort of the officially released World in My Eyes video. We never, sadly and tragically, never got a World Violation live release. I do really like Songs of Faith and Devotion era Dave, but it is such a different Dave than what we had seen before, just in his, heroin-induced days with the long hair and the goatee. His stage performances were absolutely incredible, but I'm more inclined to default to the short-haired, no facial hair Dave. And certainly not... My least favorite's got to be Spirit. The sleazy showman, slight mustache, kind of goatee Spirit Tour, Global Spirit Tour Dave is probably my least favorite of all the live Daves. But which is your favorite live day as I work live Dave? Drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com. All right, let's go ahead and get to your emails this week. There's quite a few. Friend of the show, DJ Sparkle, writes in, I would not have known had Google not sent me a push notification late last night that a new Depeche Mode album had dropped. Of course, I panicked and I dug into as much as I could, but there's not much information. You can buy it on Amazon, etc. I couldn't provide you much information, at least a screenshot you can see if you Google it. Look at the release date today, May 8th, 2024. So I've gone back and forth with DJ Sparkle on this. I went and looked at the posting of what he's talking about, and it looked like a Christmas album. What this is it appears to me to not be an official Depeche Mode release. The K-Rock radio in L.A. and their almost acoustic Christmases, Depeche Mode had performed, I think, a couple times there. And I know one of them for sure they had streamed live if they didn't stream all of them live. This looks like sort of an off bootleg label that's gone and put up a recording of that live stream from the K-Rock Almost Acoustic Christmas Show, and it's now available up on Amazon and I think Spotify as well. So this does not look to be an official release. Apparently one of DJ Sparkle's friends thought it was AI, but the moment I saw Christmas, I immediately thought Acoustic Christmas, and that's what this appears to be. And I can't remember, you have to apologize, I didn't do the digging on this, but I remember that one of the Acoustic Christmases they did, it was obviously post Songs of Faith and Devotion. I want to say it was around Sounds of the Universe, but I could be wrong on that. Might have been Singles Tour. But I remember they did a really interesting version of Walking in My Shoes during one of those. I know I have the recording of it somewhere, and I'm sure on the live wiki you can go and find it there. But that's what friend of the show DJ Sparkle is referring to. All right, Amana Yu writes in, I think the question already has an answer relating to AI. It's too late. AI music will not go away. Another key point DM fans are missing is that it does not matter if AI-generated DM is not 100% DM. No Depeche Mode hardcore fan is 100% DM. They are 90% DM plus 5% Bob Dylan, Prince, and this is what AI music will deliver, a tailored content to each and every individual on the planet. Interesting take. I just got done with a rant, and I don't want to get into it again here on this podcast now, because I got into it in detail on my Star Wars podcast. If you're interested, I just went on a really lengthy rant based off of an email that I received from a fan of my Star Wars podcast about AI art and AI art generation, and kind of going back to the podcast that we did here. I talked about this as a matter of liking it, being a Depeche Mode fan, and whether that's right or wrong. The way that the question was framed to me was more along the lines, if somebody went and tried to copy one of my science fiction EMBARK books and tried to write it off on their own, skipping over copyright, and my gut reaction to that was, well, legally you couldn't do that. I would be flattered as a writer if somebody went and tried to go and do that, but legally you couldn't be able to do that. So if you want to hear it in sort of my thoughts in that in its entirety, if you go to the Star Wars podcast and just search My Nerd World Star Wars, it'll pop up. And if you're not interested in the Star Wars content, skip to the listener feedback. There's not a lot of them this week on the latter half of the podcast. I spend a good 10 minutes towards the end of the podcast talking about this, and you might be interested in it. I know that the YouTube host, Von George, he has his own Depeche Mode hub now, and he went and covered the Andrea Fryer-created AI Depeche Mode song that inspired that particular episode. And speaking of which, Andrea, my apologies, I always go back and forth on that, Andrea Fryer, has written in regarding that very podcast where I talked about her. And she writes, "Thank you so much for this wonderful podcast. I listened to it for the first time last night and only found out about it because someone had linked it in the comments of another channel. I was all smiles listening to you because it felt like you really got me. I'm so glad you enjoyed the song, and yes, you should try making your own songs with Udio. It's great fun. And they've recently updated the software with much better tools for extending as well. So it's even easier to get a reasonable song structure now." So Andrea, I'll tell you what, I want to invite you on the show, so let's be sure to reach out. Hopefully you catch this. If not, I'll message you. First off, you can tell me if it's Andrea or Andrea. And second, I would just love to pick your brain and talk Depeche Mode. So let's get you on the show. Thank you so much, though, and I'm really glad that you enjoyed the podcast. When I first saw your name pop up in my emails, I was like, oh no, what did I say? And thankfully, I'm not a mean guy, so thankfully you liked what I said. So thank you so much for reaching out. All right, Amy in Worcestershire writes, "Long time no speak. Hope all is well. Greetings from the UK, where the Eurovision Song Contest has descended, and an AIDM would probably be a marked improvement on many of the acts." Boom. Lethal. AIDM certainly lacks the warmth and emotion of real Depeche Mode, but I would be interested in your views on virtual reality DM. You may have heard of ABBA's Voyage in London, where VR avatars or avatars recreate the concert experience from the 70s. It will never be as good, but image motion capture mode enabling us to relive the Rose Bowl, World Violation, or devotional concerts could solve future problems like the lack of concerts in Asia or South America. I doubt necessarily an investment would be worth it financially for DM, but I imagine it could happen with mainstream music eventually. Personally, I'd always choose the real thing, but hearing your comments on tribute bands in recent shows, I thought I'd give the Devout a go in Birmingham in July just out of interest. Have a great week. You know, I've thought quite a bit about that, actually. I think it would be really interesting to see a Depeche Mode-like performance in a smaller venue focused on a really good light display with visuals of the band and even something like that. I mean, you would be going in knowing what you were getting, but there's a part of me that would actually rather go and experience something like that more official to the band, hearing the band's music, right, from Depeche Mode music as opposed to a cover band. So I'd be almost interested to go see that than I would to go see a Depeche Mode cover band. Now, granted, I haven't seen any of the Depeche Mode cover bands, so it remains. So, you know, I got to be clear there. So I don't know what I'm missing. But I've often thought, man, wouldn't it be great to put on just an amazing light show with some incredible, compelling visuals for fans to go and enjoy Depeche Mode music to? And maybe something like, you know, AI avatars could fit the bill. Fixer UK writes, "We can only hope that Memento Mori isn't the subliminal message that some are translating it as. Maybe some solo stuff next, and then rejuvenate, collect their thoughts, and hopefully at least one more album, but DM will be forever." Friend of the show, Michael Tennant writes, "Even though Depeche is my favorite band, and I would say that the most sophisticated lyrics are those written by Neil Tennant of Pet Shop Boys. As for Depeche Mode continuing, I feel more positive that they will. Making music is what they love, so long as they still enjoy the process get along. I don't think that this is the end." Now, Michael also writes with regard to AI, "I'm not a fan of AI music, but I'm biased because I'm a musician. As an independent musician, it's already hard enough to find an audience, and now as technology gets better and better, it's going to make it even more difficult. To that point, if you go into the notes for this podcast, there, as they are every week, there is a link to Michael's music. It's really great. I enjoy it quite a bit. I think you, as a Depeche Mode fan, will as well. So I hope that you will go in and take a look at it for yourself. Again, it's in the notes for the podcast this week, so I hope you'll go and take a look. All right. Also, we got a comment that comes in, listener feedback. Hey, John, I'm following you on Spotify, and when you took your time to tell about Memento Mori, I was very excited to hear it at its full. And I have this album at a very high on my Depeche Mode list of top albums. It's that good, but I have a strange feeling that this could be bye-bye for this band. I hope not, but it could be the final for Dave and Martin. Why? Well, at their age, both are old, and they have a family to look after. It would be nice to have a final album. Just my thoughts, and thanks always for your great podcast for my favorite band of all time. And thank you for that as well. I greatly appreciate it. All right, let's go to Dave Fulton, also not Matt, because I get you guys confused sometimes. Listening to your segment in the Mirror's list of most sophisticated songs while on a walk, I found myself saying out loud like a crazy person, what a load of unmitigated bollocks. At the risk of tempting draconian UK libel laws, I want to go out on a Yankee limb and say without fear of contradiction that I don't believe any such research was ever performed, and the Mirror manifested this study from the dusky catacombs of their collective pseudo-journalistic arses. Putting aside for the moment that Elton John was on the list and that he does not write the lyrics for his albums, to cite Macro as an example of Depeche Mode's lyrical sophistication seems at the very least random at the extreme and appears to be some kind of stealth insult or perhaps parodic attempt to take the piss from the band. Macro is on the very, very short list of terrible, no good, very bad Depeche songs within that subset of songs not penned by a man named Vince. Hey, hey, what's your name? Not for nothing, I spent the better part of 20 years writing a book-length song-by-song analysis of Depeche Mode in my attempt to justify my expensive liberal arts degree and my almost equally expensive Depeche Mode fandom. And while that project has not seen publication, the fact remains that I have misspent a good deal of my life obsessing over the minutiae of Depeche Mode canon. And I feel I'm better positioned than most to say that Martin Gore's lyrics astutely and eloquently communicate the angst, anxiety, and sublimity of the human experience as it pertains to love, lust, and societal alienation better than 99% of mainstream pop bands in history. But in a pop world that includes a band like the Smiths, a songwriter like Morrissey, and with a record collection that includes many albums from bands like The Cure, Susie and the Banshees, The Velvet Underground, Devo, Talking Heads, Joy Division, Sparks, Midnight Oil, Nick Cave, R.E.M., and yeah, say their names, Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen, to say that I find the Mirror's reporting to be straining credulity would be an understatement. Here's a more accurate and honest rendering of that judgment. Hot, wet rubbish, served on a stale, hollowed-out baguette and topped with cat litter. Other than that, spot on. High-quality reportage. Your faithful correspondent, Dave Fulton, a.k.a. not Matt. But always, hello, Matt. All right. And then lastly, Thunder Boogie writes, I'm a professional musician, and I discovered Depeche Mode very recently, in the last 2 years, in fact. When I first listened to them, I listened from a musician's point of view. I didn't see the hype upon first listen. Depeche Mode were everything that I was the exact opposite of as an up-and-coming musician. Rush was my favorite band growing up, which led me to Genesis, Yes, and others of a similar genre. So it's safe to say that Depeche Mode wasn't even on my radar as a young touring musician. My first DM experience was hearing Just Can't Get Enough and Everything Counts. I felt like this was a band who had just pre-programmed the music and played click track live, while having to play live to all those sounds as Dave, Martin, Christian, Andy, and Peter added their parts live, which wasn't my thing as a musician. Having said that, though, I was a big fan of Pink Floyd and the Alan Parsons Project, who did incorporate a lot of synth keys and tracked elements into their music in the 70s. So I was happy to investigate further. I guess you could say bands like Pink Floyd pioneered some of these elements into electronic rock fusion medium. However, when I discovered Depeche Mode, I did in a way that was uniquely to their own. An amazing polyphonic kind of symphony of sound in every song that I didn't expect once I dove deeper into the band. This, to me, is what sets Depeche Mode apart from the conventional rock bands and electronica of the 70s and 80s. If you take the time to listen to their catalog of music, you'll hear the synth keys, piano, bass, and even synth guitar layered in a way that I can only describe as a way a classical composer layers in the elements of an orchestra. This is where you can hear the genius of the band. It's layering of these sounds with Dave and Martin's amazing vocals and harmonies that gives their music their uniqueness. The drummer Christian plays perfectly for Depeche Mode, and in my opinion, really brought to life the band's live solo performances where they didn't have that functional solid drum element in their earlier years, especially when you consider the bass parts are pre-recorded. Trust me, as a drummer, I know how hard it is to groove to tracked instruments, especially bass. It can sound very robotic, but Christian pulls it off with a great tone and tons of feel. Finally, the incredible lyrics by Martin and others who have written for the band evoke vivid images of a life's experience from the darkest to lowest lows. To the light and hopeful optimism, the lyrics are profound and relevant. Depeche Mode really is a soundscape for the soul. When I listened to the band, I noticed that Dave and Martin sound so connected. It seems like Martin is writing for Dave, and Dave is the voice of Martin. Suffice it to say, there is no one like them, even though I'm late to the party, and welcome. I now consider Depeche Mode one of my favorite bands, and if I was ever asked to play drums for them, it would be a dream. Thank you, Thunder Boogie. And I think I speak for the fans listening right now that there really is no better way to wrap up the podcast this week. It's amazing to hear people find Depeche Mode after all these years, and they still are able to have that impact, especially in the world that we live in now, where there's so much entertainment that we have access to. And no shortage of opinions of anything anymore, right? To be able to, one, listen to something, allow it to grow on you, and not dispense it quickly as something you're not interested in, which is also incredibly easy to do in the world that we live in life in general now, considering, see what I did there? Considering that you have so many options. I think a lot of us feel like, I don't have time to mess with this. I'm not liking it. I'm going to move on to the next thing because there's untold amount of entertainment available to me. So, Thunder Boogie, congratulations, and thank you as a Depeche Mode lifelong fan for taking the time to get to know this band that so many of us that listen to the show have come to love. Welcome to the Devoted and the Black Swarm. We welcome you in with open arms. Man, you know, if I hit the music like a second before, it would have been so much more impactful. Really underscores the importance of timing. Hey, thanks for checking out the show this week. Hopefully I have some news to share soon. I haven't heard anything. My sources have been very quiet lately. Hey, if you like science fiction, and you like Depeche Mode, you already like Depeche Mode, but if you like science fiction, check out my science fiction space opera series. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member. After Earth faces its end in 2172, you can follow Pilots Taft, who's a massive Depeche Mode fan. At a time in the story when the music of this era, 80s through 2000s, is nostalgic and popular among the characters, you can follow Taft, Katha, and their crew on a journey of survival across the galaxy as they fight for humanity's future. Book 1 in the series, EMBARK Book 1, there are 7 books in all. It's really a combination of all the genres, the movie genres that I love. It's got a little bit of romance, if you think sort of Say Anything coming of age type from the 80s, but also disaster. And then, of course, space opera, due to my love of Star Wars. So head on over to Amazon.com. You can pick up the ebook, Kindle Unlimited if you're a subscriber, paperback, audiobook, and hardcover. 7 books in all in the series, but if you want to support the podcast, that's how you do it. Treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction. And if you've got little ones, you got kids, the books are great for ages 11 plus. No language, nothing explicit. In terms of violence, just think Star Wars. Doesn't get much more violent than that. They really are just sort of morality tales. Good versus evil. Freedom and liberty versus tyranny with cool spaceships. Amazon.com. EMBARK, Jon Justice. All right. I got to go create the screen grabs for the podcast today and then get to my actual real paying job. But thank you so much for checking out the episode once again. And I look forward to hearing from you between now and next week. I hope wherever you are that you're happy, you're healthy, you're safe. God bless. We'll talk to you then. Bye.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.